Hey guys, in this video I'll show you one of the strongest subclassing combinations for solo play. Subclassing arrives in update 46, which goes live on 2nd of June for PC and 18th of June for consoles. I've already tested it by soloing hard mode Virtual March of Sacrifices on the public test server, which you could see in my other video. And when it goes live, I plan on testing it in more places, which you might be able to see on the website guide if you're watching this video when update 46 is already out. You can use this build to obliterate any kind of regular solo content, like arenas, world bosses, dolmens, dragons, volcanic vents, horror storms, mirror incursions, etc. Because all of these things are 100 times easier than soloing 4-man DLC dungeons in veteran or hard mode difficulties, which this build is capable of. When it comes to ESO content creation, there are lots of untested scam builds out there, so I wanted you to be sure that this build actually works. So you'll be able to find both logs and recording of soloing the hard mode March of Sacrifices dungeon. Logs allow you to check various statistics of a fight, like damage done, healing done, which ability or item did the most healing, etc. And you can even watch a top-down replay of the fight. It's not necessary to look at it at all, but it's there if you're curious about finer details. Later on, I'm also going to show a bunch of parses on the 6 mil unbuffed dummy, so you can compare this build to other solo builds. The build is also on my website, so if you prefer written guides over YouTube videos, you can read it there instead. The link will be in the description. The three skill lines we're going to use are Sorcerer's Stormcalling, Nightblade's Assassination, and Arcanist's Herald of the Tome. So your base class can be either Sorcerer, Nightblade, or Arcanist. Arcanist has an edge over the other two in very easy fights, where we don't need to use Spell Order, because then we can use Velofi, which gives Minor Force, which lets us remove Barb Trap and fit in Banner Bearer. But Banner Bearer is only worth it if we can use the Arcanist's Class Mastery script, which generates cracks. There is no difference between the three classes in more difficult content, where we do use Spell Order. Moving on to skills. This is the base setup that will work for most situations, and which should be your starting point when making situational setups. First we have Cephaliarch's Flail, an AoE spammable that generates cracks, heals you if you hit any enemy, and increases the damage enemies take from you by 5%. It will also trigger the Splinter Secrets passive, increasing your penetration by 1.2k. Next we have Pragmatic Fate Carver, extremely powerful crack spender that deals full damage in AoE, has massive range of 22 meters, and grants you a big damage shield when you channel it. It also grants you 1.2k pen from the Splintered Secrets. Next we have Inspired Scholarship, an ability that deals lots of damage, and ensures you'll have at least one cracks when your beam ends. It also grants you 1.2k pen from the Splintered Secrets. Next we have Quick Cloak, an ability that grants you a short burst of movement speed, major evasion buff which reduces your damage taken from AoE attacks, and deals damage over 30 seconds. The damage it deals can proc your weapon enchantments, which is important because you can't proc them with light attacks while beaming. Next we have Camouflaged Hunter. This ability will passive grant you the Major Savagery and Major Prophecy buffs, which will increase your critical chance by 12%. It will also grant you the Minor Berserk buff, which increases your damage done by 5% for 5 seconds, after you deal a critical damage from enemy's flank, which has a very wide radius, and can be done by simply walking to the side. It will also trigger the Slayer passive, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 3%. Next we have Soul Harvest, a cheap ultimate that increases target's damage taken from you by 20%. This is the ultimate you should use in single target fights. You need it on your front bar to trigger the passives of the Assassination skill line. Having it slotted will also cause you to regain 10 ultimate whenever you deal a final blow against an enemy. Next we have Hurricane, an ability which provides a crucial mage resolve buff, which provides almost 6000 armor, and it deals very good damage. It also grants you a 15% movement speed buff during its duration. Next we have Relentless Focus, an ability that will passively grant us 400 weapon and spell damage. Do not consume the stacks. Next we have Elemental Susceptibility, an extremely loaded ability that does a multitude of things. First of all, it's completely free to cast, so it helps us sustain. Second, it applies Major Breach, which reduces enemies' armor by 5948, which is a massive damage increase. And third, it applies Burning, Chilled, and Concussed stats effects at the beginning and then every 7.5 seconds. All of these stats effects deal decent damage, but Concussed will also apply Minor Vulnerability for 4 seconds, increasing enemies' damage taken by 5%. Chilled will also apply Minor Maim for 4 seconds, reducing enemies' damage done by 5%, and it will also apply Minor Brittle for 4 seconds, if you were on your Ice Staff bar, while the Chilled effect procced, which is always going to happen at the beginning, when you cast Elemental Susceptibility. Minor Brittle increases critical damage taken by 10%. The Chilled proc will also synergize with our next ability. Elemental Blockade will constantly apply our Backbar enchant, in this case the weapon damage enchantment. It will also constantly apply Minor Breach to enemies who are chilled, and they will be chilled thanks to elemental susceptibility. Barb Trap is a dot that will also apply Hemorrhage stats effect at the start and grant you Minor Force buff, increasing your critical damage by 10%. And lastly we have the Languid Eye, an extremely powerful ultimate that deals damage in a small AoE. Use it in AoE fights or when you start fights with high amount of ultimates stored up. So that was the base setup, but now I'm gonna show you a bunch of situational skills, which you can use to tailor this base setup to specific fights. Quick Cloak is the first skill that has to go when you need to slot something situational, unless the situational skill specifically says that it's replacing something else. Banner Bearer, with the Shock, Class Mastery and Courage combination on it, will increase your direct damage by 6%, generate cracks every 5 seconds, and grant you Minor Courage, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 215. Use it instead of Quick Cloak and Barb Trap whenever you're using Velofi Urmage's Amulet instead of Ring of the Pelorder as your mythic, and your base class is Arcanist. Next we have Resolving Vigor. Use it for more difficult fights where the pressure is constant and thus you need the Minor Resolve. It can also be used as your main source of healing before you obtain the Ring of the Pelorder mythic, or in fights with invulnerability phases where you can't heal with Pelorder. Critical Surge will heal you for 3300 HP whenever you deal critical damage, up to once every second. The heal itself can also be a critical heal. Use it whenever you need more healing. Next we have Silver Leash, a chain ability that you can slot in trash packs to stack enemies and get through them faster. Ulfsted's Contingency, with the Bleed, Gladiator's Tenacity and Force combination on it. It's a replacement for Barb Trap, in fights where you need more damage mitigation. It's a delayed AoE damage that also grants you 8% damage reduction for 8 seconds, and Minor Force for 22 seconds, which increases your critical damage by 10%. You should recast it every 8 seconds when under pressure, and every 22 seconds otherwise. Next we have Revealing Flare. Use it for more difficult fights, where you, once again, need more damage mitigation. It's a skill that passively grants major protection, reducing your damage taken by 10%. It will also trigger the Magicka Aid passive, which increases your Magicka recovery by 10%. Consuming Trap is a very weak dot which replenishes your resources when the affected target dies. It can provide you with a lot of sustain in fights which constantly spawn weak adds. Next we have Precognition, an ultimate that breaks you out of some otherwise unavoidable stuns. You'll need it to get around some mechanics which are otherwise impossible or very difficult to solo, like for example Infernus Hold in Zan the Scalecaller fight. Ball of Lightning is an ability that teleports you forward. Use it in fights where you need more mobility, or in fights where this teleport allows you to invalidate some mechanics. Now let me show you a bunch of examples of how your final setup could look after you apply these situational skills to your base setup. This is a setup with lots of damage mitigation, for bosses that hit very hard. Revealing Flare replaces Quick Cloak, as it provides 10% damage mitigation. Ulfsted's Contingency replaces Barb Trap, as it's also a source of Minor Force, and it provides 8% damage mitigation on top of that. This is a setup for dealing with trash packs. Silver Leash replaces Quick Cloak, so you can chain enemies and cleave them down faster. This is a setup you should use when switching out Ring of the Pelorder for Velofi Urmage's Amulet, while your base class is Arcanist. If your base class is Sorcerer or Nightblade, Banner Bearer isn't worth it. Velofi Urmage's Amulet provides Minor Force, which allows us to remove Barb Trap. If we also remove Quick Cloak, we have enough space to fit in Banner Bearer, which is extremely strong if our base class is Arcanist, as it allows us to use the Class Mastery script, which generates cracks every 5 seconds. And now to show you a situational setup against some specific boss, here's a setup I've used against Balorg in Match of Sacrifices. Ball of Lightning replaces Quick Cloak for 2 reasons. It allows you to teleport away when Balorg begins his breath attack, allowing you to outrange it. The second reason is that it helps a lot with kiting Shades of Balorg during the fog phase. Now as for rotation, I don't use a static rotation, so this is just a list of priorities. Simply recast abilities when they run out, and follow the list of priorities when there are multiple things to refresh. Use Elemental Susceptibility, use Elemental Blockade, Barb Trap. If it's an AoE fight, or if you're starting at or close to 175 ultimate, use the Languid Eye. If it's a single target fight, use Soul Harvest, use Hurricane, use Inspired Scholarship, use Quick Cloak, and then if not at 3 cracks, use Cephaliarch's Flail, and if you are at 3 cracks, use Pragmatic Fate Carver. Keep in mind that you can pre-buff Inspired Scholarship, Quick Cloak and Hurricane before entering combat. Now as for passives, the only passive you specifically have to skip is Trifocus. I am now very quickly going through all of the passives you should get on the screen. You can either pause the video or look up this list on the website guide. Now moving on to gear. Here's an example of a beginner setup made with just crafted sets. So Order's Wrath, Tideborn Wildstalker, and 2-piece Assassin's Guile. The setup in the table uses only crafted gear, but if you already own parts of the regular setup, which I'll talk about in a moment, like Ring of the Pale Order, you can start using them immediately. If you want to solo some difficult content without Ring of the Pale Order, you'll have to add Critical Surge or Riving Blows to your setup. But for the easier stuff, the healing from Cephaliarch's Flail and shielding from Pragmatic Fate Carver will be enough. The weight distribution of the setup from the table is 1 heavy, 5 medium, and 1 light, so that you can start leveling up all your armor skill lines. Once you transition to regular setup, you'll be using 6 medium, 1 light most of the time, switching to 1 heavy, 5 medium, 1 light only against more difficult fights. Here's a list of gear that might be easier to obtain and can be used while you work towards the best gear. You don't need to start with crafted gear. Simply pick 2 sets from this list that are easiest for you to obtain. Dungeon gear isn't always an upgrade to crafted or overland gear. It's listed in case you already own some of it. The strongest gear combination without any trial gear is Deadly Strike combined with Tideborn Wildstalker. And there are a few more things I have to mention. Use training traits if you're still leveling. If you're already at max level and have enough champion points, you can instead use Divines and Reinforce on a chest piece. For overland content, you don't need as much penetration, so you can replace maces with daggers. For overland content, you don't need as much penetration, so you can replace Ice Staff with Inferno Staff. Now we're moving on to the regular gear setup, which is going to be your ideal gear for the majority of content. So Ansu's Torment, Tideborn Wildstalker, Ring of the Pale Order, Crushing Wall, and 1-piece Slime Crow. If you want to switch a situational set, it's best to replace Ansu's Torment if the situational set you're getting has a minor Slayer line, and replace Tideborn Wildstalker otherwise. When replacing Tideborn Wildstalker with a medium armor set, change your Slime Crow headpiece to light armor type. For example, a default setup for trash packs would replace Ansu's Torment with Suzan's Torment. Once again, the strongest gear combination without any trial gear is Deadly Strike combined with Tideborn Wildstalker. Now I'm gonna list all the situational sets. Suzan's Torment, as I said before, is the best set for trash packs, but it's also the best set for bosses that regularly spawn smaller adds. Deadly Strike is straight up better than Ansu's Torment in overland content, where you don't benefit from the minus layer and penetration bonus lines. And once again, for overland content, you don't need as much penetration, so you can replace Ice Staff with Inferno Staff. Now, this is the setup for easier fights, when you want to maximize damage at the cost of survivability. It simply replaces Ring of the Pale Order with Velofi Urmage's Amulet. Keep in mind that without Pale Order's healing, you will need the Riving Blows CP to survive most fights. And this is the gear setup for extremely difficult content. Olorim provides 430 weapon and spell damage, which is a lot, and it will provide us with the minor Aegis buff, reducing our damage taken by 5%. You can change some, or all of the stamina enchants to health ones, for extremely hard hitting bosses. Moving on to champion points. In the blue tree, you'll want to use Master at Arms, Biting Aura, Fighting Finesse, and Wrathful Strikes. When soloing extremely difficult dungeons, you should replace Wrathful Strikes and Fighting Finesse with 2 of the 4 mitigation slotables that match the fight's damage type, so Ironclad, Duelist Rebuff, Unassailable, and Enduring Resolve. Huge majority of the times is going to be Ironclad and Duelist's Rebuff. When using the full damage setup, you will have to replace Wrathful Strikes with Riving Blows in most fights. In the red tree, you'll want to use Bands of Vitality, Bastion, Rejuvenation, and Fortified. In fights with lots of adds, Bloody Renewal can be stronger than Rejuvenation. Make sure to use Bracing Anchor in fights where you have to block a lot of attacks, and where you don't have to move that much. And remember to use Celerity in fights where you have to move a lot. Moving on to race. When it comes to solo PvE, you need both damage and survivability, so pretty much all races have useful ratios. The best race for dealing damage is Khajiit. While the critical damage from Feline Ambush can sometimes be wasted due to critical damage being capped at 125%, it will never happen in solo content, because there will be no tanks or healers, providing you with the major force buff. The best race for survivability, and what I am using, is Nord. The Ragged Racial will provide around 6% damage mitigation. Now Mundus. Huge majority of the times, you should use the Thief Mundus, which increases your critical chance. For extremely difficult dungeons, you should consider switching to the Lady Mundus, which increases your armor. Now attributes. For most content, you should put all 64 points into stamina. For difficult content, you should devote as many attribute points as necessary to health. For some content you'll be able to get away with 32 health, 32 stamina. For the extremely difficult stuff, you'll need 64 health. Moving on to food. Most of the time, you should use the Orzorga Striped Trifle Pocket, which provides max health and stamina recovery. You will need it to sustain. If you have some additional sustain from another source, like for example a sustain racial or alternative gear like Essence Thief, you could instead use Braised Rabbit to Spring Vegetables, which provides max health and max stamina. Moving on to potions. Most of the time you should use Tri-Slot potions. They will greatly improve your sustain. You can craft them by combining Columbine, Bagloss and Mountain Slaver. There are better potions, but they're extremely expensive. Heroism potions can provide 100% uptime on minor heroism buff, which generates ultimate. But they're extremely expensive because they're crafted by combining Dragon Rheum, Dragon's Blood and Columbine. Moving on to Parse. The regular setup parses 68.5k on the 6 mil unbuffed dummy. If we change Ansel to Deadly, the DPS only goes down to 64.9k. The full damage setup, with Velothi and Banner Bearer, parses 76.2k DPS. Now here's the recording of the parse with the regular setup. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.